I think it's very modern. One person can go, oh, yep, that's me, or that was my mom, that was my dad, that's my relationship with my dad. That is what I also am scared of one day to be. It's very human-centric and human-forward.
This theme of the moral disintegration of modern society and trivialization of everything that's morally important. It's not an unusual theme. The treatment of it is unusual, though. It's subtle. He doesn't really want to tell you what to think. He lets you enjoy the bad things instead of just putting them in like some black mirror and letting you feel superior to it.
The themes are super relevant, and I also really want to shout out how progressive it was in ways. I mean, can we talk about the gayness? Like, there's fully gay people, obviously, in the movie, and it came out in 1960. I feel like that's kind of big.
Wouldn't have happened in a Hollywood movie at the time. Welcome to episode 211 of Film Generations, where two guys from the 20th century select a classic movie to show a panel of young film lovers and see if it still plays for today's generation. I'm Mark Netter. I'm co-founder and CEO of Electrocast Media and instructor at the Los Angeles Film School and sometime filmmaker.
I'm David Taussig, and I devoured Federico Fellini's autobiography from cover to cover.
Hi, I'm Kelly LaRue. I'm a USC film graduate and aspiring film journalist, and I am also Italian, so I love Italian movies.
Hi, I'm Olive. I recently graduated from Emerson College and am now in New York City.
Hi, I'm Guy. I am a film school graduate from the Los Angeles Film School, and I like movies.
This episode, we visit Rome circa 1959 in sumptuous widescreen black and white, following an entertainment reporter over 7 days and nights as he journeys through the sweet life of young celebrities, troubled intellectuals, and fallen heiresses searching for love and happiness. It's La Dolce Vita, The Sweet Life, directed by Federico Fellini, arguably the greatest Italian filmmaker of all time, with an original screenplay by Fellini and 3 co-writers. The movie is just under 3 hours long and has an unusual structure, commonly thought of as a prologue, 7 major episodes interrupted by an intermezzo, and an epilogue several years later. We open on a plaster statue of Jesus being carried by helicopter across ancient to modern Rome, with Marcello Mastroianni as tabloid journalist Marcello Rubini following in the helicopter right behind. We pick him up on Via Veneto in the clubs, on the street, hooking up with a bruised heiress Maddalena, played by Anouk Aimée, while his fiancée ODs at home. Later, he chases after a luminescent American movie star Anita Ekberg as Sylvia, covers the crowd at a supposed sighting of the Madonna, has a visit from his father, tries to write his novel, argues with his fiancée, and has a shocking reversal with the affluent intellectual mentor that Marcello aspires to be. The epilogue has great-templed Marcello, now a publicist for hire, still hanging out with the young and happening crowd, trying to foment an orgy, and ending up on the beach, running into a character from his past, but not being able to communicate, instead returning to the endless party at dawn. So let's join our panel and find out how the sweet life tasted for all of them. Now, for everybody except for me and David, I'm assuming this is the first time you saw this movie?
Yes.
Yes.
I was really nervous to watch it when I found out it was 3 hours. And because I watched 8.5, and that was a little hard. So I was like, oh no, is this going to be better or easier? But I actually really liked it. And the more I watched it, the more I enjoyed it. There were a couple lulls for me, but it was just so gorgeous and beautiful that even when I was maybe a little bit tired of the story, it was so beautiful. Like I literally could not take my eyes off of it.
Well, it's interesting because there's a whole argument about whether 8.5 is Fellini's greatest movie or La Dolce Vita. I fall on the side of La Dolce Vita. I think 8.5 is indulgent, but I think for the time was kind of a huge step forward. David may feel differently than I do.
So I don't know what's his greatest film. Neither film is my favorite Fellini film, I can say that. I like his more personal films like Juliet of the Spirits and Nights of Cabiria, I really love. Those are both starring Juliet Messina, his wife. I even like La Strada and Amarcord more than I like these 2 epics, but they are great films.
Definitely an interesting viewing experience. I tend to not do any research before I watch something if I can avoid it, which sometimes is great. And I feel like it could have helped for this one because I didn't understand the structure until after when I read about it. So I feel like following the plot and how it was unfolding was a little challenging. I really appreciated just the way that it depicted this like duality between something that seems so fun and inviting and is actually really empty. So I really liked the themes and the acting, but I think at the same time it was a little much for me to process at once, and I would definitely appreciate a second viewing.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly common reaction. But I'd love to know if you can put into words, what is it that felt harder to follow than a traditional movie for you?
Keeping track of the characters and who was who and what they were doing there. And that might have been like people looked alike and it was an Italian, but I feel like that was something that I struggled with. So when they went to a new place, I was like, wait, have we seen you already? This guy was also a player, which I was like realizing as I was like, wait, who are you with? You're with all these women.
Well, he is and he isn't, right? Like he sometimes scores and he sometimes strikes out. But
Yeah.
did you find it was helpful that at least you were following Marcello all the way through the movie?
Yeah, I do think so. And I think another thing I struggled with, like, not necessarily struggled with, but another thing I found interesting was just him as a character and as like an anti-hero and not being particularly relatable or likable in certain aspects.
Yeah, and I want to get deeper into his character, but let's check in with Guy over here. Guy, what was your response when you watched this?
This movie, in compared to all the other movies that we've watched on this podcast, I was expecting bigger cinematography, bigger lighting things. I was expecting, a phenomenon, and I didn't get that. You said that it was gonna. I think you're gonna dig that. Yeah, I said I think you're gonna dig it. And
Did we really say dig?
yeah.
I might have used the word dig. It's very possible.
It's fair. It's still language. People know what it means. I guess my favorite scene is the scene where he's breaking up with his fiance in the car on the middle of nowhere on the side of the road. The whole entire time I was like, he chose wrong. Women are more than how they look. You know what I'm saying? They're complex individuals. However, she's the prettiest girl in the movie to me, in my opinion. She was saying English and I think it was like Italian or something. It was like a weird sing thing going on.
So I don't know how many Italian films you've watched, but in Italian film, right up until the mid-'70s, I'd say, almost all films were shot like silent films, and they just dubbed in all the dialogue afterwards. And that was just something they did to just save money. It was just, and it was just the custom. I always used to notice it when I was younger. And I think now sometimes I don't even notice it anymore because I expect it so much.
The one thing I kind of wonder if you would feel differently if you saw this movie on the big screen, because a lot of the people have lauded the cinematography, the lighting, and kind of the breadth of the image. It's widescreen black and white, which is my favorite format. I like it more than widescreen color. The way that he uses characters, the way he uses empty space in the movie, I think is all really interesting. And I wonder if on the second viewing, you'd get more out of that.
I had to watch it on my laptop, and that was also kind of
different experience.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, let's get back to the question, because I'd like to go into people's favorite scenes and then go deeper into character. So what was it about the scene that was hitting you so hard? He and his girlfriend have kind of been fighting the whole time through the movie. He cheats on her in the first half hour of the movie while she's ODing. He does take her to witness the sighting of the Madonna, that crazy crowd scene. He and his girlfriend are having this fight in the middle of nowhere. And essentially, he kicks her out of the car. She leaves, she comes back, he kicks her out. I can't remember how often this happens. He drives off, and then it's morning, and he comes back and picks her up. I mean, and let me ask everybody here, like, why do you think he doesn't end up with her?
Well, I would say, like, I just don't think he wanted her. He wanted to always chase something, and she was just right there all the time. And I think a man like Marcello, he's always chasing something better and bigger. And she was just that safe option that I guess reminded him more of becoming his father and running into the same rut. The situation was too mundane for him because of his own ego.
Yeah, he doesn't want her. I mean, I guess he wants the security and he wants to be loved, and she does. But I mean, my question is, why is she with him for so long?
Yeah, I think her self-esteem was just so beat down. She didn't have the ego in herself to leave. And like she just wanted to be the one that finally locked him down. And I think a lot of women have a really hard time like taking initiative and just cutting someone off who hurts you.
So do you think that Marcello is like all men or a specific kind of man?
He's a specific kind of man. He has some traits of every man, but like not every man would run off and run around and flaunt forever until he's old and shriveled and like just pass out with nothing, you know? Not every man would choose that forever.
Interesting. Let's keep going with favorite scenes.
When they're doing the weird medium scene, like that whole set piece of inside the like the abandoned estate, shot wise, it was that hand going for him, like going like this. I thought that was beautiful when that woman's hand was going into his hand. That was very haunting to me. But then also when Madalena is talking through the fountain that goes through the vents to him, and as she confesses her love, he starts to become vulnerable, and then she starts hooking up with the guy, listening to him confess his love. You know, she's starting to become a lot more who Marcello is, and now he's starting to kind of like reap what he sowed for the first time in a really beautiful, haunting, scary way.
I love that scene so much because this is a movie about a guy who's kind of, as you've all kind of said already, he's searching for something he's never going to find, right? He's searching for love. He's searching for approval of some sort. He's searching for self-worth. And, you know, if I was going to name my favorite scene, that's one of the two that I would name. And to me, you pick the most haunting one. He's literally put in a room in this abandoned villa that they're all exploring by Madalena, who we haven't really seen since the beginning of the movie. And they have this conversation where they are the most honest with each other and the most vulnerable in some ways than they've been through the entire movie. My thinking when I was looking back on the movie before watching it again was like, oh, this is the moment where, you know, he could have been happy. But the cards are still stacked against him. You know, well, he doesn't say yes. And then she stops talking to him because this more handsome, younger guy shows up and starts making out with her while she's supposed to be talking.
To the sound of his love confession.
Him. I mean, she ditches him without even a word.
I've had nightmares like that. I mean, like, that's scary.
Yeah, I think that's a really incredible scene. David, what about you? I mean, you've seen this movie. When was the first time you saw this?
The first time I saw it was probably when I was about 17 or 18 and I was seeing all the classics. I do like that scene, the whole setup where he's with Madalena the first time, and you know, she's this heiress, she's flirting, she kind of picks up a call girl, and then they drive to the call girl's house, and then they have sex on the call girl's bed while the call girl's in the kitchen making tea or whatever.
The call girl, well, sex worker, right?
Call girl is really the wrong thing. I mean, that's like a modern. I mean, she's a streetwalker, as they would have said then. She's a sex worker who stands on street corners, hoping men will stop. And then he goes back to his place, and Emma, his girlfriend, has like taken poison and has tried to kill herself. In what seems to me like more of a call for help than an actual suicide attempt.
I really love the scene where they're out dancing in that little piazza. And, you know, Anita Ekberg is playing Sylvia. She's kind of this magical American Swedish movie star. As Guy mentioned, she has the blonde hair. And, you know, I've read stuff about where they say she's both devil and angel. And, you know, her husband or boyfriend, I think it's her husband, Robert, played by this American actor, Lex Barker, who used to play Tarzan in the movies. In fact, they even say, can you believe he used to be Tarzan? And now he's a painter, but he's a drunk. So he's sitting on the side while she's dancing with different guys, and she's dancing with Marcello. And then suddenly this character, Frankie, shows up, this other actor, and he's got this satanic beard, almost like a satyr, right? And he gets everybody playing, he calls up for the rock and roll. So they bring in this rock and roll singer, and the scene goes into wild rock and roll dancing and singing. It's so 1959. It's fantastic, right? And it's always Marcello on the verge of kind of being able to cross over with her and just never being able to make it. And that leads to the scene where he's chasing her through Rome, and they go into the Trevi fountain. And, every time it looks like he's about to kiss her, it just completely doesn't work. The light comes on, somebody shows up, something happens. But to me, that's kind of the heart of the movie, because I think this movie is so much about a guy who's trying to chase after something that he's either out of his league or maybe just wrong for him.
Actually, I think every scene in the movie is a failure to communicate. It's a failure to connect. And I think for me, the scene, I mean, obviously there's the whole thing that you'll talk about with Steiner, which is really, awful. But to me, the scene with the dad is like the one that impacted me the most as a failure to connect. His dad comes and visits him, and at first you think, oh, he's this like playboy, party boy. He's not going to want his dad around. But it's the opposite. He's dying to have contact with his dad. He's so happy. And he tries to show him a good time. And then at the end, his dad can't wait to leave. He's just clearly his dad has nothing to do. He's retired. He lives in some little village somewhere. He's in Rome. Can't wait to go home.
My question is, how does Marcello function? Is he worthy of dramatization? Is he a stand-in for the audience? Is the movie completely condemning him? I mean, I know it's the first time you've all seen it, and I've seen it now 4 or 5 times. But what do you think about this guy?
He's a character that probably a lot of the audience envies and maybe in their dreams would want to be. And I think in a way, without passing harsh judgment on the character, it's Fellini saying, you can be this person, but do you really want to be this person in the long run?
I think the thing that makes the movie, takes it to the great level is the epilogue, which is a long epilogue where it's several years later, he's got gray hair, he's hanging out with a completely different group of people. They're all young. They've all kind of stayed young. He's gotten older. And he's no longer a journalist. He's just a publicist. And as a publicist, part of his job is to hang out with these little celebrities, these young celebrities, and try to get their business. At one point, there's even kind of a negotiation of would you say I was as good an actor as Brando? And he's puts a price tag on it. So, I think that's what makes the movie ultimately critical, but I don't know. Olive, I was really interested to know what you felt about Marcello's character in the movie.
Yeah, I feel like I was having a hard time reading him, and which is still kind of how I feel. And I think that was also on purpose. I could tell that he was definitely not into his job in the way that these other paparazzis were, but he was also into all these other aspects of the vapid lifestyle. And he was totally a player. And so I just couldn't really tell where his morals lied, what he stood for, what he cared about, what he wanted. I think he was kind of a mystery in that way.
I mean, he's essentially a small town kid who was handsome and a decent enough writer and, charming enough that he's in this world that he probably couldn't even have imagined when he was back in his little town that his father's from. And, as a guy who's from upstate New York and has then spent time working in the entertainment business in Hollywood and stuff, kind of easy to relate, that kind of out of water, but trying to fit in, aspect of it. At what point are you actually part of the scene versus, being a pretender to it?
You're right. He's not really a part of the scene. He's trying to connect with it in some way, but he's trying to connect with it in a way that'll be meaningful for him, that will feed him, give him something. And he's not really able to because he's not an heir. He's not an actor. He's not a movie star. He's just a guy from a small town who's a journalist. And so it does have this feeling that he's social climbing throughout the film. But he does it pretty effortlessly because he's handsome and charming.
Is he better than this? Does he want to be more than this? And I think the key scene for that is kind of the intermezzo where he's in the church with Steiner. Steiner is this tall, elegant guy who's clearly an intellectual, seems to be very successful. And they chat about literature, and it's the substitute father figure for Marcello, the guy he probably wishes was his father. And I don't know if this registered with you guys, but that's where they talk about him wanting to write literature and wanting to write a novel.
It seems like that's the hope for Marcello. For me, it's like I don't think he's going to end up marrying a rich heiress, but you could hope that he's going to write a novel and sort of stop being like a gossip columnist, which is basically what he is, and at least do something a little more meaningful with his life.
Well, he goes to Steiner's house for a party, and then there's a bunch of people there. There's a woman who actually was a real-life famous poet who's sitting there, and he sees Steiner has a gorgeous wife. He's got 2 beautiful kids. He's got a great home. And there's an incredible scene. You go into Marcello's point of view, watching Steiner kind of by the window, talking about trying to get distance.
The children are so beautiful, right? It's like this typical thing. They wake up in the middle of the party and they go out to see what's going on. And then, and then everyone loves these adorable kids and they put them back to bed. And Marcello is saying, I want your life. You have this beautiful apartment. You have all these beautiful friends. You're a real writer, unlike me. And Steiner is saying, it's not everything it looks like. You think maybe he's being modest. And then you find out that he has killed his children in their beds and killed himself while his wife was away. And so you realize, there's something very dark going on in Steiner's life, and we don't know what it is.
Well, let me ask everybody here, because when I first saw the movie, that hit me like a ton of bricks. Did it hit you guys hard too?
Oh, yeah.
That's when the movie turned on for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's shocking because those kids are like one of the few pure things in the whole movie, and he kills them.
One of my favorite scenes, what I think was also one of the most disturbing scenes, which comes after with the mom and the police are trying to tell her and the paparazzi are swarming. I feel like that was just so deeply disturbing and did such an excellent job of showing how invasive this society is and this culture of celebrity and news.
Yeah, and that still happens today all the time with celebrities. Like, it has not changed at all.
If anything, it's just worse.
Well, let's go to that whole idea about how the world was changing at that point, because I think this is really interesting. 10 years prior to this, Italy's devastated. They've lost World War II. You see some of the ruins in the early part. When the statues flying over Rome, you go from the ancient aqueduct to where they're building new apartments. They're going to hold the Olympics a year later. And clearly Rome is in a huge upswing. There's money pouring in, there's celebrity, there's nightlife, there's all this stuff that had been destroyed 10 years earlier. But at the same time, the movie clearly is pointing at some sort of spiritual loss. So I wondered if anybody had any feelings when they were watching the movie or now about how they think the movie deals with being of that moment.
I feel like it's all a coping mechanism. I think about just today and how, whether it's the state of the world or our own personal drama, like drinking, partying, all these things are such a common distraction and way to numb the pain. So I feel like on the scale of war, it makes a lot of sense that these people would be just like collectively staying out all night, numbing their everything.
I think the Madonna scene is hugely that sentiment. These 2 little kids who I kind of think are messing with them as the scene goes on.
It kind of seems like it.
Yeah, like they're just like, they're cracking up because their family wants that fame and fortune and that security of worship, I think, in a weird way. But yeah, I think all those hordes of people, they're like just waiting for this hope this like confirmation, I think, of like their religious beliefs to like save them and make sure everything is okay because of the turmoil of World War II. It's anything that's to hold on to that everything will be okay at some point.
Just to make this clear for the listening audience, this is a really big sequence in the movie where Marcello takes Emma and Paparazzo, the photographer, to a place in the country where these two little children claim to have seen a sighting of the Madonna. And everybody seems to believe them that they saw the Madonna. And literally hundreds of people are there, some trying to be healed by being close to the Madonna or close to the kids. And when the kids finally come out for the public, they kind of go from one spot to another saying, oh, I see her over here, or I see her over here, which I think kind of gives the game away that they're fooling with everybody. But what you're talking about with belief, Kylie, I think is I think that's why this is a crucial scene in the movie. I was blown away when I first saw it.
You almost feel like the crowd knows it's bullshit, but they're so excited to be creating a sensation and to be a part of this sensation and to be there. And I think that's a comment in a way about how all this celebrity culture gets created. People need to make something happen and feel that they're next to something big. Watching this movie again for the first time in about 20 years, I was actually struck by how subtle it is in a way. This theme of the moral disintegration of modern society, and he doesn't really want to tell you what to think. He lets you enjoy the bad things instead of just, putting them in like some black mirror and letting you feel superior to it.
It's a very European way of talking about something. And it is very Italian, and like spending a lot of time with like my boyfriend's family from Rome and those dinner parties and the way they talk about culture and things in really deep things in a really simple way is, I think, very inherent in Fellini, because it's a sequence of what's just happening in their daily life, and it could be these crazy events, but they have just a couple frank things to say about it and they move on.
So I don't know if you're exactly asking like if this movie was made today, if it would have the same impact. I feel like it even has similar themes to something like Fight Club, and that's just such a completely different way to go about expressing like disillusionment in society.
Modern alienation.
Mm-hmm. And I think maybe we'll get to this later, but something else about this movie that I think must be so key to it is the context of the times that it came out and how shocking or out there some of the content was for the time. I think it was like just alluring to people to be able to see these sorts of things on screen.
Well, let's talk about the religious side of this, because I think the spiritual/religious side is real interesting. Do you think that Fellini is being at all critical of the world at this point, or kind of saying that religion doesn't matter anymore? Where do you think he's falling as far as a potential spiritual critique?
I think that the beginning scene does a really good job of that, of people getting so enamored by this thing representing Jesus, but that in itself doesn't actually have any sort of spiritual significance. It's just performative and external. And so maybe that's part of what he's trying to say with religion, that it's just yet another thing that people put faith into to feel less of that disillusionment.
It takes a lot of, I think I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but idolatry.
That's good.
Everyone is just looking to look at something because they want to worship something they can see and something they can almost put their hands on. I think that's where, I think Fellini is critical of the church, not, I think, of itself, but more on the people and why they worship it.
Yeah, I keep coming back into this idea of connection. People need to connect, right? And the way to connect with God is through the church or through an image of Jesus. You connect with God somehow, but it's probably, I don't know how well. I mean, maybe some people get a really meaningful connection that way. It's not something that would work for me.
I'd also argue it's community too. I mean, there's an interesting moment. This whole movie is constructed with nighttime scenes that are really kind of exciting. And then the dawn comes and it's kind of like, blurry eyed, like, oh my God, what are we seeing? When he's with the rich people kind of 3/4 of the way through the movie, going to the empty villa, in the morning, you see them all walking out and they come to a church. where the woman who actually owns the villa, I think, the Grande Dame or something, is going into church with the priest, and they're not going to church. This whole party is not making community there. So one of the things that religion does when it works really well, I think, is it gives you a way to create community and connect with other people as well as God, if you have that faith and that belief. And what the movie's kind of saying, and I think of a way that's critical, but not of religion, is the idea that this hanging out with the celebrities has become the new religion. Our new God is Anita Ekberg dancing like crazy and going into a fountain. Let me ask this question. Do you think that Marcello's character is doomed to become the guy that he becomes at the end? Or is there another possibility for him that is kind of the road not taken?
I do think that he could have gone other ways, and it was a choice. I mean, maybe there are certain parts of him that are naturally certain ways, but I don't think he was necessarily destined for this lifestyle. No one is.
Do you think that the Steiner murder-suicide is the thing that makes him ultimately give up?
Yes, but he chose to give up. He chose to make that choice to give up at that moment. That was like the deciding moment of, do I take this road or that road?
So what did you think of his behavior in that epilogue where he's smashing a picture of him, a glass ball with his face on it, where he's trying to get people to take their clothes off, and he's throwing wine in a woman's face and things like that.
And he's like feathering that poor sick girl.
That was hard to watch.
He's pulling her hair and hitting her and like literally riding her like a donkey. And I was like, no, who is this guy? Like, you're so miserable. Like, it hurts me.
Yeah, I think one scene where you see some of his weakness is between the first scene with Steiner, where you feel like, he's getting some ambition, but before Steiner kills himself, is that scene with Paola, I think is her name, at the gas station. He's in some gas station somewhere, or a little restaurant.
Are we talking about the little cafe that he's at, trying to write his novel?
She's setting up the dishes, and he's got his typewriter, and she's kind of, she's bored, so she's talking to him, and he wants to write. He doesn't want to flirt with her. He's sitting there and he says he's trying to write, but he ends up flirting with her, and he ends up not writing. And I think that's the moment where you see that he's just not ever going to make it.
What's the feeling the movie leaves you with at the end?
I felt like life goes on, like, and it's not good or bad, you know what I'm saying? Because it was kind of like, to me, a real realistic look at life, and not just life in Italy, even though I've never been or know much about Italian culture. It seemed like that could happen anywhere, any modern society around the world.
But that brings me to an important question that we like to ask a lot of times when we talk about these movies. We've seen a lot of movies that have dated aspects to them. How do you guys feel as far as this movie? Do you think this movie has dated? Obviously, there's a lot of stuff about sexuality and spirituality and celebrity. Is it still all relevant for today?
The themes are super relevant, and I also really want to shout out how progressive it was in ways. I mean, can we talk about the gayness? Like, there's fully gay people, obviously, in the movie, and it came out in 1960. I feel like that's kind of big. I'm no expert on like queerness in film, but that seems really early to have like two men fully doing like drag. So
wouldn't have happened in a Hollywood movie at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's very modern. You can put every second of the movie into, and every one person can go, oh, yep, that's me, or that was my mom, that was my dad, that's my relationship with my dad. That is what I also am scared of one day to be. Like, it's very human centric and human forward.
Yeah, you can do like a translation of the script to English and just shoot it exactly how it is, and it still works. It just update the cards, update the locations,
and cut it a little faster. For the
you got to do
sensibility.
something by that time.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I'm so in love with the way the movie's shot that I never feel the drag. I always think I'm going to. And I think the first time I felt more of it than I did in subsequent viewings because I knew what to expect. The way he uses the camera, he does things where he'll create these huge empty spaces, and then other shots will be jammed full of people, and the faces are fascinating. And sometimes they're looking directly at the camera as the camera moves past them, or they go from being a point of view shot to being an objective shot. You feel transported in time. It's so well made. It feels like you're in a time machine. Yeah. I mean, I hope everybody gets a chance at some point to see it on the big screen because it is.
It really doesn't compare, these tiny little computers.
No, it's not a way to see a movie like this. This movie has a big scope to it.
All right. Let's get into a little bit of the research of the movie. Kylie, I think we tasked you with the making of.
Yes, I definitely wanted to focus a lot more on the cinematography and camera language that I found. The production took about almost 5 months in Rome, Italy. Shot on location, except for very, very few instances where they had to do some studio to keep up with like consistent lighting. So yeah, 5 months, April to September, and 2 months were just dedicated only to night shoots. But the cinematographer, Otello Martelli, say that 5 times fast, is a 2-time collaborator with Fellini. They had a very, very close relationship, which was super important for this movie, because Martelli was saying in the article how Fellini would just change on a dime. The script would change. Martelli said no matter how odd or unconventional Fellini's choices were, like they were always a beautiful choice that was usually the right choice for the film, and even challenged the way that he even conducted his crew and camera crew and lighting crew. The focus and the focus pulling was super important to show the disconnect and the isolation between characters, how the focus would pull to someone who's talking and then subtly pull away to the next person to show a type of haziness. At night, it was fantasy, it was fun, it was that indulgence, and then every time dawn showed, it was the reality of their situation, like at the epilogue, like in the Trevi Fountain, realizing, oh, what am I doing? What have I done? Who am I? One thing I want to end on is like just a quote that Martelli said that I think is really nice. It says, director Fellini has given the film individual style by deliberately distorting the characters and the surroundings, and also by their clear-cut figures, which I just think like the relationship between the cinematographer and Fellini was so beautiful, and just the care they took, and also how fun they made like their shots to be, I think is really cool. And yeah, it's gorgeous, and the lighting I think was amazing for black and white photography.
Wow. Guy, you did the reception, I think, right?
Yeah, so that was kind of hard to dig out. It made 19 million overall. That's a lifetime total. It did experience a resurgence in the 2000s. I think it was like the 2010 was like the 50th or whatever, and they did re-release it. IMDb gave it 4 stars. They do a five-star scale. Rotten Tomatoes, it's like a 95%. It didn't rank at any of the American box office lists that I looked at for the time. But the number 1 movie in America that year was The Swiss Family Robinson.
Oh my God.
Number 2.
I saw that when I was a kid. Disney.
Number 2 was Psycho.
Yes. Oh. All right. Olive, did you get to do any research?
I did the impact of the film, and there was a lot and a lot of different aspects. One of them we already talked about, which I think is so cool that the term paparazzi came from this movie. In terms of cultural impact, the way that it depicts post-war Italy. And you just have to think about like the lack of technology and how much movies were a glimpse into a certain culture that you didn't have through Instagram or anything else. So it was also very like influential in the fashion. And narratively, it was obviously like very unique structure that popularized that. I know certain filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino were inspired by movies like this that were just like completely different, unusual structure. There's other parts too. It had a lot of impacts, but I'll leave you with that.
David, can you tell us a little bit about everybody's favorite Italian, well, I don't know if it's everyone's favorite. Can you tell us a little bit about Federico Fellini and his career?
Well, of course I can. Fellini is such a giant of the cinema. And particularly, he really towers above the pantheon of all these great Italian film directors. You know, the way that Kurosawa and Bergman would lead the way in Japanese and Swedish film. He's really huge. I think 2002, there was a Sight and Sound poll of the greatest film directors of all time. The critics and film directors participated in, and Fellini was voted the #2 greatest director of all time, right behind Orson Welles. His father was a traveling salesman, just like the father in La Dolce Vita.
Wow.
And Federico was born in 1920 in Rimini, where the international airport is now named after him. His was a middle-class family. Out of high school, he became a cartoonist. And one thing you see in a lot of Fellini films are really wonderful faces. He always casts people with interesting faces, particularly for the small background roles. And I think a lot of that comes out of his background as a caricaturist and cartoonist. And doing that, he met some of his future film collaborators when he worked at a magazine called Marco Aurelio. He got work at the famed Cinecittà movie studio in Rome as a screenwriter and a joke writer. And he bounced around doing that, but eventually got onto a film directed by the great neo-realist Roberto Rossellini. And Fellini's screenplay for Rome Open City, which Rossellini directed, got an Oscar nomination. And trying to avoid the draft into Mussolini's fascist army, he wrote for radio, so he'd have a regular gig. And he met his future wife, Giulietta Messina, who back then was a radio actress, which is a little surprising to me because if you've seen her in films like La Strada, he really has her almost working like a silent actress. He really concentrates on her face. But she started in radio. Fellini became Rossellini's assistant director on the 1946 film Paisan. And then in 1950, he got a chance to co-direct a small film called Variety Lights, based on vaudeville. And then he made his own neo-realist film a few years later called I Vitelloni in 1953. And it's a wonderful film. And it won the Venice Silver Lion. And that enabled him to make La Strada, starring his wife. And La Strada was a knockout international hit. And from there, he just never looked back, making film after film. Some of the influences he cited, besides Rossellini, are Luis Buñuel, which speaks to what Olive said about the dreamlike nature of his films. Fellini often speaks about dreams being more real to him than reality. Yeah, he may be being a little coy about it, but he said many times that he could never be a witness because as somebody who works with his imagination professionally, it's like he says he's always making things up. He can't tell the truth without adding a little bit of a lie, and he can't write fiction without adding the truth from his life into it. And he says it's just a big melange. His life, the films. He said that directing one film is the same as directing any other film. He does have to write scripts in between, so there's a blueprint, but that essentially once he's on the set, he's just directing the same film. It's the same thing every day. He's just directing. His other influences that he mentions are Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and the Marx Brothers. He really loves comedy and absurdism. So all in all, more than 20 films, 17 Academy Award nominations, hundreds of international awards, including a record 4 Oscars for Best Foreign Film, more than anyone else. I'll mention, just for people that want to know about his filmography, that the really prime films, besides the ones I mentioned, I Vitelloni and La Strada, are Nights of Cabiria, La Dolce Vita, 8.5, Juliet and the Spirits, Satyricon, Roma, and Amarcord.
All right. I think it's time for us to do our recommendations and reviews. I'm going to start off with Olive. Olive, who might you if anybody, recommend this movie to? And how many stars would you give it? We have a 4-star system where 4 stars is an A plus. It's a movie that you'd put in your top 50 movies of all time. 3.5 stars is an A list movie for you, A, top grade. Maybe just didn't touch you as personally as the 4-star. 3-star movie is an A minus, which is an excellent movie that might be flawed in some way, but is doing something interesting. 2.5 is a B plus. 2 is a B minus. That's either a good B movie or a not so good B movie. So how do you rate this one?
I feel like I would recommend this film to my father because none of my peers I would probably recommend this film to be honest. Subject to change after a second viewing, but I'm going to give it a 3 for this one. I definitely liked a lot of it. It was a bit confusing. And after talking, I feel like certain things that were intentionally absurd or ridiculous, I just was like, what is happening? And now I have like a different understanding.
Kylie, what about you?
I recommend this definitely to anyone who thinks that they are just like are culturally, they feel in tune with Italians. Because this is like truly the test of like, can you stand hanging out with Italians really for a long time? Like, can you keep up? And then also to my little brother, because I think this is one film that I've seen that he hasn't, and I want him to watch it because I know we can argue over it because he probably would not like it. So I want to have the argument. After being able to discuss it and realizing that like I just need way more time to process it, and I so can't wait to talk about this movie for the rest of my life. It's like a 3.5 now for sure, just because I feel like it gives so much, and I have the ability now to rewatch it and continue to love it and enjoy it with other people too.
Guy, what about you?
All the other ones they usually like just like blow me away, but this one kind of didn't until we talked about it, and like now I'm like, excited to go back for the rewatch. I didn't watch it 3 hours straight. I made it to right after the car breakup scene. That was like when I said, okay, let's stop here. And then I went back to a couple of scenes before that. I can't remember how it was one of the reasons why everything's out of order to me. But yeah, I'm gonna have to give her a 3.
Mission accomplished.
We got him.
David, your turn.
This is a hard one to rate. So I will say that the film is a classic. And it's really interesting. It's deep. It bears multiple viewings, and despite the length, I think the viewings are pretty enjoyable. I think in a way, the toughest viewing is the first because you can be a little confused. And I think the more you understand what's, kind of sitting under the surface, the more actually you get. So I've enjoyed it more each time I've seen it. So there you have it. It's a 3.5. I first of all recommend it to anybody who wants to see all the great films that really have to see to be literate, if that's the word you can use for movies, because they're not literature, but to be literate in, the filmography of the great films. So I'd recommend it to anybody that can enjoy foreign films, that can sit through a 3-hour film and can meet the film halfway. A film that's not going to just tell them what to think at every moment, but a film that's going to present them with a quandary and a lot of interesting situations, a lot of interesting questions.
For me, I would recommend this film to anybody who's really serious about loving movies and film history. Anyone who's okay watching a movie that's older than 10 years. That I just think it's such a huge achievement and a huge part of history. And as I made mention of the Fellini films that I've seen so far, it's my favorite. And it's the one that I've seen the most often. It's one that I can come back to over and over again, and there's no diminishment of pleasure. In fact, it gets better in certain ways. There's more nuance. I took pages of notes when I watched it this time about the different transitions, the choices, the juxtapositions. I think that the movie feels like a novel to me, and not every movie does that. For me, that's why it's a 4-star movie. It really touched me personally. Sometimes it's in my top 10, sometimes it's in my top 20, but it doesn't fall below that. And I watch it again, almost any time.
As a group, we gave this 3.4, so 3.5 stars because we always round up.
The Dolce Vita is available on and off various platforms, including Turner Classic Movies, Criterion Channel, Fubo, and Max. You have to consult Just Watch to find out where it is right now. It's also available in several DVD and Blu-ray editions. I would say try to get the newest Criterion one if you can. But if you ever get a chance to see this in restored print on the big screen, run, do not walk to the theater. You will be in for a very big treat. You can find Film Generations on YouTube with clips and stills and on audio podcast platforms wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. If you do like our show, please tell your friends. Please rate and review us so that others can find us as well. Film Generations is an Electrocast production, and I'd like to thank our panelists, Kylie LaRue, Olive Goldberg, Guy Lewis, and our co-host and producer, David Tauzik. Our executive producers are Mark Netter and Peter Rafelson, my partner at Electrocast Media. All right, I kind of want to keep with this Italian theme. We ended our first season very big with Citizen Kane, and we're going to close out season 2 of Film Generations in our next episode with an equally momentous cinematic milestone released 31 years after Orson Welles' groundbreaking opus in 1972. It's an ethnic family saga, a corrosive vision of 1940s, 1950s America, a vicious crime epic punctuated by spasms of indelible violence. From the bestseller by Mario Puzo, it's Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, James Caan, Robert Duvall, and Diane Keaton starring in Francis Ford Coppola's blockbuster, The Godfather. Does this classic mob story still blow away young film lovers with the same impact as when it shot up the box office 52 years ago? Well, you know where to find out. It's only here on Film Generations.
Electrocast.